good evening once again. I hope I'm audible. Hi. So let me begin directly. I generally, go for some common questions first, try to set the mood, but I think the mood has already been set. We're already aware about the importance of the topic, right, and how the prevention can be done, and what needs to be done. So Durgadas, let me start with you first, and I have specific questions for my, speakers here directly. So let me take the regulatory landscape first. Generally, we discuss regulations later, right? I mean, first we form the innovation and then think about the compliance. Yeah. So let me do the reverse. Let's talk about the compliance regulations first and maybe innovation later. So my specific question to you, Durgadas, is how do you see regulatory landscape evolving given the adoption of digital payments specifically? With increased adoption of digital payments, how are banks safeguarding their customers?
Yeah. So good evening, everybody. So before I go to the landscape of regulatory reforms that have been happened for this fraud monitoring and all, just to give a background, it all started, this digital word itself is so wide. Yes. Earlier, maybe prior to 2016 and all, we were not so familiar with this word. But post the UPI coming in 2016 and the demonetization all, the transactions has increased manifold, as our speaker also said sometimes back. Yes. I don't have numbers per se, the numbers itself speaks. So with this increase in transactions, the frauds also have increased. And to curtail this, the regulators have come out, they are at the forefront. And they have come out with all advisories and regulations to see that these frauds are arrested at the right time. And it is, with these advisories, the banks also have to play a very important role in this. There are various ways by which banks can help or work with RBI and the regulators in curtailing frauds. And for that, there are various ways which include encryption of your data, data security, which plays a major role, followed by customer awareness. This customer awareness has become a very important aspect of curtailing frauds, because there are various types of customers that enter into these transactions. And there are various, categories of customers also. So to help these customers and their transactions to be secured, this has to be done. Also, like we have this PCI DSS also, where we do a system audit or the system, it's a continuous process. So any system level controls or auditing has to be done on ongoing process. It cannot be just, it cannot be a one-time activity. Having said so, the way banks have been evolving themselves with the new controls and the RBI and the regulators with the regulations, I also feel that it is the duty of the customers also to safeguard their own interest while transacting, like not sharing their OTP or passwords. Okay. In spite of telling or the banks coming out with awareness campaigns, customers do share their password or their OTPs, which leads to the frauds. Again, they also access various websites which are very vulnerable to frauds. So, along with the banking and the regulations set by the regulators for the banks, I would feel that the customers or who are transacting should also play a very important role in safeguarding this.
Yeah, absolutely. At one side the banks will create their firewalls, but on the other side the customers needs to be quite cautious, because RBI is coming with a lot of ads, right? RBI kehta hai, right? So interesting points there, Durgadas. Let me come to you, Aditya sir, and learn more on the customer aspects from you. So my specific question to you is, customers are doing transactions using multiple channels like cards, UPI, and omni-channel internet banking. How are banks covering risk across different banking channels and safeguarding the customer, uncovering fraudulent activity with cross-channel analytics?
So first of all, good evening to everyone here, and good evening to you as well.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for calling me for this panel discussion, and thanks to ETBFSI and of course the SAS, who are the sponsor probably, for arranging this type of programs. I think here all of us are fighting those who are sitting here fighting with a common enemy. Digital transactions volume, I think something has already been discussed in the hall. And what is the most important thing, my previous speaker, Mr. Rege, has also touched upon that, is creating the awareness, the consumer literacy, the education, and the awareness regarding the digital payments, how the digital payments are conducted and what are the vulnerabilities, those have to be discussed. Now, actually, these payments, the digital payments which you are talking about, so this started, I think, with the card transactions.
Right.
Now, in case of card transactions, those are globally interoperable transactions, and actually we have the PCI SSC, and we have the multiple standards which has been prescribed by the PCI SSC. So we know about the PCI DSS, PCI, multiple things, PCI PTS. So at every point of time, they control how the data has to be secured, and actually even when the data is transmitted, how that time it has to be secured. Now, if we look at the players, so we have multiple players. Now we have if we talk about the P2P transaction in the UPI, we have the remitting bank. We have the beneficiaries bank. Now, if we talk about the P2M transactions, we have the issuing bank, actually where the card has been issued, and we have the acquiring bank, the banker who provides necessary infrastructure to the merchant. So, and in between we have the card networks, we have the NPCI, we have the Visa, MasterCard, Amex, JCB, so many card networks are there. And plus we have other players, other new emerging players, so we have the payment aggregators. If e-commerce transaction has to be done, so payment aggregators are there. Now, with the UPI, we have seen another kind of thing, the face is different and at the back-end transaction is being done in other cases. So we have the Phone Pay, we have the Google Pay and all those Paytm, and so actually multiple players are involved in these kind of transactions, and these transactions, as you have rightly pointed out, multiple channels. So I will come to that. So multiple channels are there, and every channel and every partner. So actually this awareness has to be created at the industry level. The more is the interaction, and actually if we have to have more collaboration, more interaction with all the players, I think these kind of summits will definitely help. And see, one person, or even if I say I am the State Bank of India, I have the 47 crore saving bank account, but still the database which is with us, I think even that may not be sufficient to find the trends, how the things are happening in the market. Now, if we look at the fraudsters, today we are talking about the payment frauds. I think they are moving ahead of us. They have found out the ways to defraud the people without, in fact, making much effort. They are playing with the human emotions. Right. See, they are playing with your behavior, what are your behavioral patterns. They are playing with that. See, what are the two most important, most powerful emotions as a human we have? We have the fear and the greed. Yes. Now, they play with that. See, now you will receive a call, you will receive a message, you will receive some telephone call, and they will talk about, this thing, if they are aware, some areas has to be distributed, and they will call to those vulnerable customers who will probably fall prey to them. They will tell them, you are a pensioner and your arrears are to be released. Now it is to be credited, and these are your account details. Please confirm if this is correct. If it is not correct, then you click here, or you just download this particular file. That is how they will play with you. See, the latest one, I think 50% of the people who are sitting in the hall must have received the communication regarding the income tax refund. Yes. Yes. I think 50% at least would have your income tax return has been processed and you have been approved this much amount of the refund, and this is your account number. They will deliberately write some XXX, and the last 3 digits will be some 235 or something, which will not match with your actual account number. Then they will ask you to confirm your account number. So that is how they play with your, see, as a human being, yes, we need money, so they will play with that emotion. Then second is the fear. See, tomorrow, I am calling from some electricity board, and your bill is pending for last 3 months, and tomorrow we are going to disconnect this. Now you are under pressure. See, your see, your children is studying in this school, I am calling from this school, and the fees has not been paid, and actually there was a tour arranged, and your children will not go, so I don't know how you will handle your child. So that is how they play with your emotions.
Yes.
You know? And what happens in that scenario, customer himself shares all the details.
Absolutely.
See, we were talking about the card transactions. Now we have the EMV, the chip.
Yes.
So with the chip, you cannot skim the card. Skimming has gone out of the scene. But at the same time, they have found out a way that they will swap the card.
Yes.
See, they will be around you in the ATMs and other places, and they will help you. And again, they will target who are the vulnerable customers, whom can be targeted. They will go there, help them, the illiterate people, or maybe the pensioner, the senior citizens. They will help them in doing some transactions, and before they understand, their card is swapped.
Right. Right.
And second day, what will happen? See, or maybe within an hour, what will happen? A recent case I was seeing at Hajipur, one pensioner was helped by one person. Actually, both husband and wife were there. So one transaction 5,000 rupees was done, and another transaction for 4,500 rupees was done. They helped them, and they didn't realize. And then ultimately, what happened? Within an hour from Patna, 50,000 rupees were withdrawn at the point of sale terminal.
Right.
So that is how the frauds are taking place. Now,
Sure.
coming to your specific question regarding the multiple channels. Now, if I have to transfer the money from me to Mr. Dethe, so I have multiple channels. Earlier, we were having, I have to issue a check, or I will issue a draft in your favor. But now you have seen what happened in 2004 and 5. We got the NEFT, we got the RTGS. In 2010, we got the IMPS. And then 2016, as he mentioned, and somebody from SES, they mentioned, income, our demonetization, and then we started pushing the UPI transactions. So we have multiple. We have the internet banking, the mobile banking, the UPI, then the debit card, again IMPS, NEFT, RTGS, n number of channels are available, and a very, very this thing appropriate question I think you have framed, very intelligently framed questions.
Sure.
Because two things. See, in India, we are the country of 1.4 billion people, and every customer has different choices.
Right.
Now, even in spite of the UPI 10 billion in a month, but still there is a set of people who will use the card, another set of people who will, in spite of all the popularity, all the triple S which we talk about, the speed, security, and the seamlessness of the transaction, they will continue to use the internet banking, somebody will use only the mobile banking. So all those channels are there. Now all those channels, the journey is different, the characteristic of the transaction is different, and again it goes with the particular individual choices.
Absolutely.
And in the fraudsters,
Okay.
see, fraudsters, once they get the personal details, as we discussed, so once they get the OTP and they will use the emotions, once they get all those things, what they will do, they will actually suddenly get activated on all the channels. All the possible channels they will get activated. Transaction will come from the UPI, transaction will come from the internet banking. So all those things, yes, we are experiencing. And it's really a challenge. Now,
So Aditya sir, then we'll do one thing. We'll talk about the challenges in some time.
Yeah.
But we spoke about channels a lot. So
Yeah.
let me get Paytm here. First, I just broke the rule. I wanted to come with Elango and then
but let me
Union
finish
Bank.
in 2 minutes then.
Okay, quickly. Yeah.
Quickly I can finish. So basically, so now we have talked about the channels. So there are multiple channels. Okay. Now, just see, individual channels, yes, we can control, but at the same time, ultimately, it is going to hit a particular account.
Okay.
Now, what is done for all the channels? I think every bank has. So we have the proactive risk management cells, and we have those proactive risk management engines as well, where for every channel and looking at the customer profiling. So customer profiling is done. The vulnerability of the customer is assessed based on multiple parameters. Their age, their education, their geolocation, and multiple things. Okay, then we will look at the how the transactions, the particular characteristic of that particular transaction. What is the transaction history in that particular account? Then we look at how the transaction pattern in that particular channel. So that is how the business rules are framed. And once those transactions start hitting the accounts or this thing, the alerts have been generated at the account level so that it can be controlled at the account level. Right. So that is how it is being controlled. Now, one more minute I will take. So actually, the second part of your question. How do you identify? How do you identify the people? I think that is a very, very challenging thing. But when the alert is generated on the risk engine, you can call in that popular term. So these people, see, what happens in many cases, they get the access to the mobile number and everything of the customers. So our people, we have the auto dialer as well. And from the auto dialer and from our case analysts, they will talk to the people, and when they are talking to the people, they will identify that I am talking to the correct person or I am talking to the fraudsters. See, the name is South Indian and the person is speaking the Bihari language. Okay, so that will give an idea. The gender, account says, now there are common names, the Jyoti Prakash or something, and that is the female account, but somebody the talking is the male. So then that kind of questions will be put up to those people, and these people who are talking to them are the trained people, and they will identify from there. Sure. So that is basically how it is being controlled.
Sure. So quite a detailed one, Aditya sir. So because we spoke a lot about channels, so I have to bring Paytm here. So how the people first get confused with Paytm and 197 communications? I'm not asking you to disclose that, but Paytm core is very simple, right? QR scan code and payment is done. I mean, that's with all the banks and also. But अगर कोई fraud हो जाता है, तो resolving that fraud is also that easy. That is the first question I quickly want to add. And you also want to add, what are the tools and techniques that can be used to control the UPI frauds?
So I think, 197 Communications is a parent entity. It is sits at the top of the group, and Paytm is the brand, and the app, we call it as the Paytm, and within that entity we have multiple group entities, Paytm Payments Bank, Paytm Payment Services, which is a payment aggregator, and Paytm Money Stock Broking, Paytm Insurance Broking. So generally, just to give a high level flavor. And when we talk about the way in which the resolution in terms of the fraud has to happen, I think that is one important challenge in terms of reaching out, especially the way a customer has to approach, because there are multiple channels that the customer has to approach, starting from, say, for example, writing to us, writing to NPCI, writing to the issuing bank where the transaction is actually occurred and the account has happened. But there are also other channels that are available. Once this resolution channel fails, for example, we see a lot of these complaints coming from police authorities where the customer has gone, or even they have gone to the banking ombudsman, or they would have given into the cybercrime portal, because these are all related to the way in which the cyber technology is getting misused. But the fundamental thing I would like to mention here, the fundamental thing is, I think you have mentioned about Frankenstein yes. In terms of the monster. I think the real way in which we have to look at this Frankenstein in the Indian context is, it is not one single Frankenstein. Right. We have three different Indian mythological Frankensteins, I can say. So the one is basically the Bhasmasura, the one who has got a boon to get all miraculous things done. But the moment he gets on to in a kind of an euphoric mood, in that process, he let loose of the controls actually. So the monster can be from the entity itself, the first one. The second in the monster could be Vibhishana, which is basically our internal employee who knows of the tricks and trade basically. Yeah. And he actually exploits that in terms of putting our own organization to risk. So that's the second type of Frankenstein, Vibhishana. The way we can also see is basically the way Krishna in Gita says, Dhyutam Charaitam basically, he gives in chapter 10 of Gita a variety of things which are the epitome of his manifestations actually. And one of the epitome of manifestations of the crime, he says basically, is betting, gambling. And he says that if at all I have to give manifestations of crimes, I will say I am, say for example, the betting actually. Betting includes some sort of prejudice or some sort of greed that comes. So the third type of the Frankenstein we have to deal is the greed that is inherent in the customer. So a very important component we need to understand is it is not that we invented some monster and then we are not able to control. There are three dimensions actually, starting from the controls at the entity, starting from the way the employee fraud has to be done, starting from the greed in respect of these things have to be, customers' greed has to be managed, and then is the resolution comes into picture because each of them have got their own way to handle. I'll only take a minute because to understand that, we need to understand the payment industry first.
Yes.
The biggest mistake, or rather the biggest shortcoming in the industry I can see, for example, even in this panel, we talk mostly about bank. I think we almost have ended that kind of a phase of bank getting involved almost like 4 or 5 years back. So the entire industry, as someone was already mentioning, in the chain of events, there were multiple players that are involved, and one of these players are like the payment industry operators. And why this is an important aspect to consider in the payment fraud is because the focus completely shifts from a bank to a kind of a payment fraud. Whereas all bankers are familiar with what we call as KYC, know your customer, but the payment industry has to operate on KYM, know your merchant. Because it is not just the customer having money in the bank account that gets duped actually. The money in the bank account should get accepted at several places. So the amount of the investment that you have to do on the merchants, for example, the KYM becomes a kind of an important component in the entire payment aggregator industry. And here is where a lot of work is still to be done across the industry, across the regulators in terms of giving what are the kind of regulations in terms of consistent practices in terms of how to onboard a merchant, which is still work in progress. And then the time between the things of like earlier money laundering, for example, we used to have a crime, crime leads to proceeds of crime leading to placement leading to layering leads to integration. We used to have time in a, like months or weeks before this process takes. But what payment industry has done is to cut short all these things into like maybe few seconds, few minutes. From the time crime gets committed, it generates proceeds, it generates placement, it generates layering, it generates integration. By the time you really see in terms of the nature of what has happened, is it a fraud, is it a cyber incident, is it a, say for example, a money laundering activity, by the time you really lay your hand, it would have changed the character. It started with a cyber incident, then became a fraud, and then suddenly becomes a money laundering, and then becomes integrated. So how do you really put your finger and say that now this is what is, say for example, a fraud that I have to deal, or a cyber incident I have to deal? It's extremely complex, and it is something industry has to come out with several of these alternatives. And then there is a lot of capacity building across, because somewhere I saw RK's presentation where he mentioned, say for example, some of the things like IP addresses in China. It's so easy to say, but you can't definitely pinpoint and say that this is in China. Because the IP address is only can tell you that where the IP address has come from, but it is not necessarily that the person is sitting in China. He would have been sitting in India, and he would have been using a VPN, and to identify the person is really outside is extremely Herculean task. I have not come across a technology which lays down something on IP address and then say that you can track the customer's location easily. Absolutely. And lastly, the same thing in terms of the expectation in terms of how some network analysis has been shown, like directors, for example. Nowhere in the expectation of the regulation is that we should do a kind of a due diligence on the directors, neither under the PMLA regulations nor under the RBI regulations. What we are required to do is customer. We are supposed to do beneficial owner due diligence. We are supposed to do the authorized signatory diligence. The jurisdiction of the director, for example, is something which is now getting questioned, because we're having experiences, but the laying down the expectation that we should have done a due diligence on the director is a far-fetched, what do you call an expectation, which of late I'm seeing also in the mindset of investigators. So we need to also engage with the investigating agencies in a much more detailed manner, explaining how this industry works, how these KYC norms are defined, and if people are doing their responsible job, they should also be partnered in the process of the investigation. So the entire perspective of moving our focus from banking to payment industry calls for a step up in terms of our understanding of process, in terms of our understanding of the vulnerability, and also in terms of our capacity to handle the investigation.
Sure, sure. In fact, over the years, the whole reconciliation settlement time has also been reduced, and a lot of BFSI companies have started embracing a new designation called Chief Investigative Officer, right? So, Elango sir, let me come to you and understand the risk and reward point specifically from you. So, what is the true cost of maintaining that relationship and safeguarding their trust at the same time adhering to regulatory expectations?
Good evening. In banking, we are dealing with customers' money.
Yes.
And basically, trust is the most important thing. Any person who is subjected to a fraud, most likely he may leave the bank unless he is getting quick redressal of his problem. That means he should be in a position to immediately contact the bank. The bank should respond immediately. And then what is the reimbursement rate and how the process or the experience which he has in this process is satisfying to him. And to look into these aspects, some of the areas which the bank should be very particular. First is that protecting the data privacy. For that, you have to put up appropriate systems so that even if a fraud happens, it is not because of fault on the bank's part. And second is that the bank system should be up and running maybe 24/7,
Yes.
so that there is no disruption or neither that customer is need to wait for putting up his problem. Then it is your transparency with the customer. Transparency with the customer sense, because you see, for business purposes, we do keep some data of the customer for analysis or cross-selling purposes. But we should be clear with the customer what is the data we are keeping and what is the use of that particular data. And lastly, customers look at character or the moral, ethical standards of that organization. So there it is very essential that when we deal with such cases, we need to walk the talk so that the customer's confidence increases. And in today's world, because of the swiftness with which WhatsApp, social media news spreads so fast, any bad news can spread in such a speed. Right. It can bring up a lot of problem for the organization. And here, if we have the trust of the customer, possibly we can save ourselves.
Okay, sure. So Venkat sir, let me understand from you. Most of the banks have focused on preventing digital frauds. They have compliance risk officer in place. But are banks moving towards an enterprise-wide, fraud monitoring rather than siloed approach? Because having individual specific firewalls and then having a wide approach, how do you look at that?
Yeah. First of all, good evening, and thanks for inviting. See, first, let us understand the entire ecosystem in 2 minutes. How the digital payments have started. Maybe 20 years back, ATMs, all these things were there. Then the net banking has come. Maybe 8 years back, that GM has come. Janadhan, give the account. Aadhaar, give the identity. Then M-Mobile. All these 3 things combined with the customer convenience has come to this digital ecosystem. That is the first thing. And what are the different platforms available? It may be UPI, it may be IMPS, it may be net banking, mobile banking. So many different platforms are there now. Correct? Now, since we are discussing about the frauds, let us take 2 minutes for this. How the fraud is happening. As per me, earlier we used to talk about the CPU score. What is the CPU? 24 MB RAM, 48 MB RAM. Now, just I was listening to sir and all these things. Correct now? I was thinking we should go for some GPU score now. What is this GPU? G is greed. First thing, the fraud is the greed factor.
Okay.
See, all those highly educated persons or tech persons, they are falling to the greed factor. You click this WhatsApp video or YouTube video, you will get 50 rupees for each click. This is nothing but a simple greed. Yeah. Correct? Second, we will come to the P, panic, like sir was telling. See, these fraudsters, they work on our emotions, sentiments. They are doing the social engineering. Morning you are starting to the office, suddenly you get a message, your electricity connection will be disconnected today. Yeah. Then what you will do? Immediately you give a call on that number, you will download a screen sharing app, entire your amount comes. That is the panic, they are working on the panic. Third is the most important, like Sarva was also telling, self-monitoring, that is the user awareness, where we stand. Just now I was listening, more than 10 billion transactions in a month through the UPI.
Yes.
But what type of people are doing it? How much they are aware? See, unless we are aware and we monitor, self-monitoring is the best monitoring.
Yes.
Correct now? So let us talk about the GPU score. G, one has to work on the individual level. P also, ecosystem as well as the individual. And last, user awareness. We all have to work together. That is the first thing. Second, you have asked regarding whether we have to work on the silos or like that. No, we don't have to work on the silos. We have to see for the EFRMS. See how the transaction is coming. It may be through the net banking, mobile banking, UPI, IMPS, NEFT, RTGS. A transaction may come from anywhere, not within the branch only. It's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, holidays, every time it will come. Yeah. So naturally, you should have a very, very big firewall. When I say firewall, I am not talking about the technical. I am talking about the monitoring. Most of the monitoring what we are doing is generally post-mortem like. Event has taken place and then we are monitoring. Already fraud is committed. Then we are talking how to prevent it. But we have to go for the real-time monitoring. There are some tools are available. We have to go for the real-time monitoring. And here, since so many seniors are there, in fraud, the time is very, very important. X has transferred the money wrongly to the Y. Y has cheated X.
Yes.
Now where the money lies? With the Y. By the time X knows he has been cheated or fraud has been committed, the money moves from Y to Z and Z to some other. So time is very, very important. We have got some cyber crime, 1930 number dial there. Some bank you have to dial. All these things are there. But why don't you use the UPI channel? See now entire payment system with UPI is there. Through UPI, each banks are linked through the NPCI switch. And each UPI transaction gives a RRN number, reference number is there.
Yes.
Why can't we use that RRN number and immediately block the funds in the other bank? Why I should call someone 1930 or some bank or something? I have been cheated, I will use my RRN number and I will block the funds.
Yes.
This is my takeaway. Thank you.
This is very useful and informative, Venkat sir. I think half the people don't know about it. But you know, two speakers spoke about the electricity. You know, what I have observed is the people from the Mahavitran or the electricity board will come and disconnect and go. Yeah. They will never call you. they will never even check with you. That's what they do. You know, that's the first thing that the people should know, that they will never call you. You know, so quite interesting, I think, updates here. So Ian, let me learn from you in terms of a little tech perspective, because we heard the bankers. They quite explained, you know, what the process is, what are the firewalls they're building, and what are the challenges they're facing. What I learn a lot from, you know, the tech companies is artificial intelligence, you know, strengthening security, and specifically machine learning perhaps will, you know, solve this problem. So the specific question that I have crafted is how machine learning can be more productive in keeping up with the risks posed by the fraudsters, and how does real-time profiling change behavior of customer with fraction of seconds used by these models?
Certainly, and thank you for that. Yes, AI and machine learning is definitely going to help. And if I summed it up in one word, I think that would be efficiency. I think what we have heard today a lot of is the increase in volumes of transactions passing through either payment aggregators, the networks, or even the banks is increasing. But it's not just the transactions. That has an element of prediction associated with it from a growth perspective. What we do need to think about is the necessary evil we all carry around with us, which is the devices which we utilize to make these payments. And from that, we are able to actually gather and harvest a lot more data, which can help with a lot of the fraud problems we've heard about today. So what we are able to see is that up to 700 additional pieces of data in a stream, a message coming from your devices as you make any type of event on your phone, whether that's to apply for a new account, whether it's to try and interact with a payment, or whether it's to actually even just update some information with your bank. So this information can be streamed in, and that's where the efficiency of AI and machine learning can come in. It's needed to be there. We also have efficiency from a technology perspective, as was mentioned. And so we are able to utilize the efficiency of the technology, the increases in data volume, in order to process this. Now that's going to give us the context, but the other benefit we're going to get from artificial intelligence and machine learning is the efficiency from an operational perspective. Right. We all know that many of these people who are and people in the room who are invested in fraud, they're not really there to stop fraud, they're there to give customer service. It's the genuine customers that you cannot hinder today whilst you're trying to save that loss line and achieve your target. And those people need those false positive ratio reductions in order to ensure that you are only targeting the frauds. And that's where the efficiency of machine learning comes in, to ensure that we are being efficient with our customer service, but internal effort to solve the frauds is also reduced. So we have better quality frauds, our people are working on better quality fraud alerts, and therefore we can be more efficient from those perspectives.
Sure, absolutely, quite meaningful. So the time is a little up, we had a limited time, but what I will do is I will just borrow maybe 2 to 3 minutes and give maybe 30 to 40 seconds to each one of you. And quickly, you know, as sharp as possible, as quick as possible, जो हमारी भाषा में headline कहते हैं, you know, and the question to all of you is same. Looking at the current situation, what is missing and what are you going to do? Considering the fraud management, considering the risk that is happening. And Durgadas, same question for all of you. Durgadas, I will start with.
So I think hello. So sometimes back, one of the speakers said about this EFRMS. Yes. That is the future of banking as far as fraud monitoring is concerned. Because today, I'll give you a simple example. A person using his credit card in Mumbai, and at the same time, there's a transaction on his debit card somewhere in Singapore. Right. These type of transactions are very vulnerable transactions, important for us to track. Right. And so EFRMS is going to be a very important feature. And to add to it, AI and machine learning will also be a very important aspect.
Sure.
So basically, now the battle which we are fighting is slightly different. Our customers have shared everything, and then we are trying to save them. Now this is happening with the help of real-time business rules and the near real-time business rules, where we continuously process the financial transaction related to that particular customer, whether he has changed the mobile number or he has opened the new account, so all those things, along with the transaction which is coming. I gave you the example of somebody helped at the ATM, swept the card, and he did the post transaction. But actually that person was saved by us because of two reasons. Because our engine immediately this thing fired the alert. We contacted the person whether you have done this transaction, because in the history of your transaction, this was never done by you. So that is how we are saving. Now, actually, the two things what we are doing, and again, the master direction issued by the RBI on 18th, February 2021. So they are talking about the behavioral biometric, and they are talking about the geo tagging. Then they are also talking about the source from where the IP from where the transaction has been generated, and the beneficiary where the transaction is being hit. So actually all those things, this is a continuous journey. We are on a continuous basis, we are doing the analysis at our PRM cell, and in fact we want to achieve exactly what the regulator wants. Okay. The directions are very clear, only thing that will take some time, and I think that will also depend upon how we can collaborate within the industry with all the players.
Right, yeah, but you know, I think the bankers should also think about having some James Bond powers, you should go and control it before it happens. Yeah, Elango, sir.
Yeah, actually, whatever learning we have from any fraud incident, that should be used to improve our system first. And secondly, because the fraudsters come out with new methods of doing fraud, the customers also should be educated that how do they save themselves. 0% fraud, it cannot happen, but at least we can minimize that.
Sure, Venkat, sir.
See, first of all, create the awareness. That should be the mantra.
Okay.
Correct? Simple. UPI, if I am transferring the fund, I am sending the money to you, I have to use the UPI pin. Yes. If I have to receive the money, no need of using the UPI pin. these things also so many people are not aware. So that is the first is create the awareness. Second, go for the profile-based real-time monitoring. I am different from you, you are different from others. So let us go for the profile-based real-time monitoring, create the awareness, that should be the mantra. Thank you.
Sure, Srinivas, sir.
So all I will say is basically learn from the fraudster. Because they have been like already miles ahead in terms of adoption of the technology.
Right.
Like while the fraudsters have moved from making their fraud typologies from a web browser mode to a mobile mode, we still have not migrated our, say for example, regulatory approaches and maybe the monitoring approaches from the web browser mode to the mobile mode. I think in that context, they are early adopters of technology. But we try to force fit. We try to create an app which is browser mode rather than a native app actually. So the thinking should be basically a native thinking with respect to the fraud management also. That native thinking will help us in terms of understanding what is unique to the payment industry fraud and why an approach centered around banking may not be the right kind of an approach, or why an approach centered only around the risk management may not be the total approach. But for a cyber world, for a mobile world, for a payment industry related fraud, what should be the unique approach that we need to deal with here is some kind of a capacity building is what I would say. Otherwise, we will have the old tools and it is like Facebook when it launched the app, it was like a web browser app actually. Yes. And then they have changed it to the native mobile first app that started clicking it actually. So I think the native thinking in terms of even the fraud management is as much needed as the fraudsters are trying to adopt a native approach to the doing fraud.
Sure, yeah.
For me, Amol, I think just like this session, I think it's time. Yes. The time is now that the volumes are increasing. We need to prepare for that. Right. The time is now to shore up our defenses. Okay. And I think the time is now to invest in real time in order to be able to protect the banks.
Okay, so need a surgical strike. Great, thank you. Thank you so much for, wish I could have some more time. I had a couple of more questions, but unfortunately the time is up and this is always a challenge, you know, whether to take it to a 30-minute, 40-minute conversation or expand it more. So that's always a challenge. But there is one hand there. I will take one only quick question because the gentleman has raised their hand. Please, please go ahead. Yes.
We have heard a lot about the customer. My question is about the customer who is within the system and doing the fraud. How that customer enters into the system, what profiling we do, whether there is a check on that level, because we always get the people, we as an investigator are able to identify, and the fraudsters are nowhere, they are in our system only. So what we are doing at the sourcing level, at the profiling level, and then when they do the transaction, you know, real at that time we can check it? No, we only do the post-mortem of it. We should be able to curb at the very beginning level. I want a feedback from all the people who are sourcing the account, the quality of people, those who are sourcing the account, business pressure, whether it is hurting our business.
Sure.
Venkat
has already taken a call. Please go ahead.
See, what you are telling, I also agree. The most important thing is the customer onboarding. Already there is called KYC, know your customer. There should be a very, very strict and stringent onboarding process, KYC. Because generally, see, we were also discussing, monitoring is the second layer. First is the onboarding. If your onboarding is very proper, the chances of getting something wrong at the monitoring level is very, very less. That is the first thing. Second, even in the monitoring, let us go for the real time. Like you are also telling, let us not do the post-mortem. Event has taken place and then we are doing it. This will not be the case. Let us go for the proactively, profile-based, real time. If not real time is possible, let us go for the near real time monitoring. Wow. That is my say. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, quickly.
I just want to ask, we are just talking about the prevention part. And we are not talking about if any fraud is happening, what is the success rate? Because I am heading the fraud in insurance sector. Whenever any fraud is happened, when we go to recovery to hospital or customer, only 20-30%, not more than that.
Absolutely.
And after that, entire story comes 30% gone to that, 40% gone to that, that fraud. Yes. We are not getting. So we are talking about only prevention, but what was the investment winning rate in the cases which is goes to RBI ombudsman, what is the bank winning rate, what is the customer winning rate in those fraud cases?
Absolutely, very important question. And if I'm not wrong, the ratio is very less in fact, because it takes long time. But anybody wants to quickly answer that? Anyone?
See, one thing I will answer. See, even I was also telling, that time is very, very important in the fraud.
Yes.
Correct? Na? Say X has given to Y, Y has given to Z. By the time X is aware, money nikal ke chala gaya out of the system. Correct? Na? So that is why I was telling why we should go for the cyber crime, lodging a complaint, all these things. Let us use the UPI ecosystem. Why to reinvent the wheel? See, UPI has got the interbank connectivity. UPI has created the transaction. Let us use the same channel. Yeah. Simply use the RRN number, block the funds within seconds. We have to think differently, then only this is going to help. That is my take.
Sure. So, okay, quickly.
Basically, I will answer both the questions in 2 minutes. Try to answer. See, the first was regarding the KYC. See, actually, in most of the cases, the sufferers are the people whose KYC was done perfectly. There was nothing wrong with the KYC. Only thing, those people, because of certain vulnerabilities, were exploited, or those were duped by the fraudsters. They were studying their behavioral pattern. They were actually, I told about this thing, fear and greed. So they collected the information and then they duped the people. Now your question, we do only the post-mortem. No, we don't do the post-mortem. What we were talking about, yes, that these are the tools using which the details, personal details are shared with the fraudsters, but at the same time we are deploying in the industry real-time fraud monitoring tools. And in many cases, see, again, if I talk about the case, probably this will be the answer to the second question as well. See, we have the straight-through transactions where one account is debited and real-time second account is credited. Now, there are the P2M transactions where one account is debited, but credit happens after the settlement process completed on very next day. Now, if we talk about the second type of transaction and where our real-time risk engine or our near real-time business rules have captured this, the success rate is very, very high in those cases. Actually, I will tell you, in many cases where the money was already credited to the merchant, still we were able to recover it from the merchant. Wow. And in case of real-time cases, I gave the example of that the 50,000 on the POS terminal. See, card was swept. Card was taken, but still we could stop that fraud. Right. So that is happening. Only thing we are talking about the AI and ML. See, today also it is happening, but probably we need some advanced tool where the financial as well as non-financial transactions will be processed on a day-to-day basis, and the algorithms will also be dynamic in nature, which will keep changing based on the transactions which are happening across various channels.
Yeah, very good. Quite meaningful. Thank you for those two questions, which I could have taken more, but the time is absolutely up, so I will stop here. Back to you, the anchor, Divya, and thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing meaningful thoughts here on this, and thank you so much for listening to me very patiently. Thank you.